Uh, I'm Walter Isaacson, and it's a great pleasure for me to have somebody I've admired for many years, David Drummond. David is the luckiest lawyer in California. He's sitting around at a law firm approximately 12 years ago, and meets two kids in a garage who are trying to start a company called Google. There are many, many lawyers in California who cast their lot with two kids in a garage. David, you're the lucky one, but a smart one as well. Welcome.
Thank you.
I think it's on.
Hello.
Just keep talking, and they'll wake up.
Thanks a lot, Walter.
Yeah.
It's great to be here. Sorry I brought the bad weather.
Yeah,
on
I
everybody.
hadn't had a cloud in the sky to y'all around. I want to start with China. Tell me what's happening now in terms of your China issues.
Sure. So people may know the background, but we decided that we were no longer going to have a self-censored search engine in China. This is back in January, and since then we've sort of been trying to figure out how to resolve this situation. We have a commitment to be in China, to serve our users in China. We have millions of them, and we feel we have a responsibility to do that. So we want to be in the country. We want to have people in the country, and we want to operate services in the country. However, we want to do that consistent with our values. And so while we made a decision a few years ago to comply with some of the rules around censorship, we were always uncomfortable with it, and we, for reasons we can get into, and sort of a gradual sort of discomfort that we just got more and more. We got more and more uncomfortable with what was going on there.
Is China getting more uncomfortable to the free flow of information?
Well, I think so. I think after the Beijing Olympics, we saw sort of in the run-up to the Beijing Olympics, it seemed to be getting more open. We were being asked to censor less. I think some of the local companies, internet companies, were censoring less. But after the Olympics, I think by most accounts of people who look at the situation, and certainly our experience, was that it was getting more closed and more difficult to operate. So we came to the conclusion, and we had said back in 2006 that if we felt different about the impact we were having, in other words, that we weren't helping to open it up and change things a little bit, or just create a little more flexibility, we might reconsider our stance, and that's what we did. So since then, we've been figuring out sort of this how to continue to operate and serve our users there while not having a local search engine that would have to be censored in accordance with the Chinese law. And so what we've kind of come up with is we have a site in China. In Hong Kong, which of course is part of China, one country, two systems, and there's no censorship there. So we've been trying to direct our users there, and we're sort of, it's kind of in the, we need a license to operate in China for our other services that don't require any censorship, and so we are sort of waiting to hear from the government whether we can get that license. But our commitment not to censor in China remains. We won't be doing it, and we're going to be doing everything we can to serve our search users in China from our Hong Kong site.
And you made a very subtle change a couple of weeks ago, right? Which is people have to click on to go to Hong Kong.
Yeah, originally what we did is when you went to the original Google.cn, which was the old the local search engine, you just got automatically redirected. The term of art, and we call it redirect in our lingo, and we automatically did that. The government wasn't particularly happy with that because they sort of felt like we were just offering an uncensored search engine at Google.cn. So now we send you to a page, and then you have a link you can click on. We say, hey, we've moved. Go to our new place, and you click on that, and you can go right to Google.
And how does this work? Do you kind of sit by the phone and wait for China to call and say, fat chance?
They have ways of getting in touch with us.
How?
Believe me, they have.
No, but do they communicate
have
directly, or do you all of a sudden wake up one morning and something's not working?
Well, no. We, I'm not going to comment on the substance of conversations, but we talk to them. I mean, it's like every country where we have a presence. We have relationships with the government, and we talk to folks. I mean, you have to talk to people.
I'm going to ask a really dumb question, but why do you want to operate in China?
Well, I think we have the same view. This is a global view we have. The thing that one of the things Larry and Sergey were really one of the geniuses of Google early on was to internationalize the site. So this was very shortly after I started working with them and the site was created and the company was created, there were multiple versions of this in many, many languages. And of course, they crowdsourced the translation by getting users out in the world to do the translation to create different interfaces in many, many languages. So as a result of that, we got millions of users around the world very quickly. This wasn't a site that sort of, okay, we're a U.S. site. We developed in the U.S., and now we're going to launch abroad. This was always sort of a global phenomenon as it progressed. And so we've always felt that, look, if we have users who are using our products locally, we feel we need to serve them. We should have people on the ground to talk to people. We should be on the ground talking to others in the internet ecosystem. Because we think we have an impact there. So we want to be there as best we can. Now, look, if we can't, there are places where we kind of know we can't be.
But what is the trade-off between profits and do no harm, do no evil?
Well, I think that look, you can make two arguments, right? You can say that the moral thing to do is to be engaged, right? And that's precisely, I think, the approach we took several years ago. And in some ways that's kind of an easy way to do it, right? It's similarly easy to sort of say, well, we're just going to boycott the country because we don't like, this policy or that policy. We're trying this middle way, which is a lot harder, right? Which is to try to stay in the country, to try to do some good in the country and provide your services locally, but at the same time not compromise the principles and be clear about it, right? One of the big problems with countries doing business in China, not just China, but other countries that restrict the internet is, a lot of times people won't talk about it, right? And so, it's sort of the real dangerous thing here is the self-censorship that goes on, right? And that a lot of Western companies literally won't even talk about that there's a firewall or that there is internet censorship in China.
Give me an example.
Well, I just think, you see it quite a bit with the public statements of lots of internet companies used to say this. They'd say, well, we have to obey the law. The law. This is the law, and that's it.
What's the difference between obeying the law in China when they say you can't talk about Tiananmen and obeying the law in Germany where they say you can't deny the Holocaust?
Well, I think they're pretty fundamentally different things, right? I think Germany, you're talking about a democracy. People elect the government. The people who make the laws, are then called to account by people. The laws are clear. When you talk about Holocaust denial or Nazi paraphernalia or something, it is pretty well defined, and you kind of know what it is. China, on the other hand, I don't think you have a government that's particularly accountable. The laws are very vague. Who knows what it means for content to be inimical to the interests of the state, for instance, or some of the other things. And I think it's very different. And in terms of the treatment of journalists, of bloggers, et cetera, you just don't have the climate of political censorship in Germany that you have in China. So I think they're very, very different.
Do you have a pretty blanket rule now against giving up private information to a country like China that could harm one of your users or bloggers?
Well, it's complicated. We have to sort of look at every country case by case. Like I said, we want to be in every country, but there are countries we know we can't be in because we know we're going to get put in the situation of either having to turn over user information or be forced to do self-censorship because we have people in the country and we have hostages. Therefore, have hostages. And so, Vietnam, we don't have anybody on the ground in Vietnam because we know they have the same kind of an edifice around censorship, and we don't want to turn over information. Even when we went to China several years ago, we constructed our services so that we wouldn't have personal information in China at all. So we didn't do any. Our Gmail servers were not in China. Blogging servers, et cetera. So if the Chinese government asks us for things, we say, well, it's in the United States and you just can't have it. And we take that approach in other places as well.
To tout one of my old friends, Benjamin Franklin, his first maxim in Poor Richard's was the importance of doing well by doing good, meaning you can make a buck by actually being of service. Google is one of those companies, and for a long time, Time Magazine was, because Henry Luce said so, that you had to operate in the interest of the public, but also operate in the interest of the shareholder. How do you balance that?
It's hard. It's funny. We don't really see that much of a conflict at Google, and it may be because of the kind of service we have. We're an information service. And we feel that more information is always better. Helping people get at more the things that they care about is always better. And serving the user just really aggressively is what we want to do. And we've never really seen that big a conflict. Again, when we went into China, it wasn't because we said, look, we need to make a lot of money in China. It was because we felt that was a market we needed to serve. The fact of the matter is we have not made very much money in China at all, nor has any other
media company.
Western media companies probably haven't. The local companies are doing better than us, but it's still not a that well developed an internet market. So look, we've felt that that we've been able to balance this pretty well because we when we went public, we said very clearly what kind of company we were going to be. That we weren't going to be driven by sort of the short-term, financial concerns. We were going to always look for the long-term, always operate with a core set of values. And we even constructed, much like the journalistic organizations you're familiar with, and newspaper companies and so forth, we even set up our corporate structure so that we could maintain what we felt was a kind of editorial integrity and keep that going despite the sort of vagaries of the market that might happen over the life of the company.
It's worked better for you than a lot of the media companies that I used to work for. What are the most interesting privacy issues you're dealing with now?
We have this certain question of driving cars around and Wi-Fi networks. That was people probably have heard about that. It's interesting only it's interesting in the sense that we made a mistake, and we're now in the process of working with various regulators who care about this to have them understand it and work through it. So that's going very well. But I think most of the interesting areas in privacy have to do with the ability to offer much better services right over the internet. Once you know more. If you're willing to let a company like Google know more about you, about what you care about, what you're interested in, where you've been, what you've done, you can deliver much better. We can deliver much better services. Now, that has to be done in a way that where the user sort of knows what's going on. The user is, the user, sort of has the control over what's going on, and et cetera. So I think most of the interesting areas, whether it's in the social networking space or advertising, really involve sort of figuring out that trade-off and the edges of how are you going to actually do that?
Give me a good example of something in the past month or two you might have been wrestling with.
Well, I think we've been wrestling for the past year or so with personal, with advertising, right? And targeting advertising. One of the reasons Google works for our users and for our advertisers is we do really targeted ads. So users think that they're actually good information, right? When they put in a search query, and advertisers, are reaching users that are really interested in their products.
When I search for something like bicycle, you know my location pretty much, right? Do you know my demographic?
No, there's really no way to know your demographic. So unless you tell us, and we haven't gotten into sort of you filling out a form and telling us a whole bunch of personal information about you. But one of the things that we have been wrestling with is this concept, what we call interest-based advertising, and trying to figure out, what attributes of people based on what they've done on the web before can be used to deliver them better information. And so we've been working with that, and we've done it in a way, and there's been a lot of concern about that, right? Because people are very concerned that you're going to compile profiles of people as they browse around the web, and then all of a sudden they're going to see these advertisements and get offers for things that they don't really want. And so what we've done is try to do this in a way that's very transparent. So when you get an ad, so first of all, you have control over whether this is done with these cookies, right, that get placed on your computer. You have control about what cookies are there. We have a dashboard where you can see them. You can change them, right? You can say, well, I'm interested in finance information, or I'm interested in backpacking gear or something, or sports equipment, that kind of thing, and you'll get better information as a result. But you don't have to do it at all. You can completely, just eliminate all of the targeting, and that's the kind of trade-off that I'm talking about, and that's the kind of way you can deliver these better services, but do it in a way where the user has a lot more control.
I know there's a knee-jerk feeling that privacy is good, but wouldn't we have a better web if there was a little bit more authentication, a little bit more, less anonymity, and we all were a little bit more responsible for what we were doing, posting, the emails we were sending, the checks we were, or the financial arrangements we were making?
Sure, but it's not an either-or thing. I mean, I think if there are people who are very comfortable with that, right? And there's debates about whether the whole Facebook generation, cares about privacy or doesn't care about privacy. But it's very clear there are a lot of people using social networking services that are, sort of divulging a lot more about themselves than people might have in the past. And that's fine. There are issues around kids doing it, right, when they don't really know the consequences. Mm-hmm. That's fine, but anonymity is still good too, right? People want to go out in the world and not have everybody know who they are and what they're doing. And so, we think Google, you should be able to use Google services anonymously, and we'll continue to have you do that.
Google keeps coming up with things I discover, and I feel like, wow, that's awesome, like latitude buried somewhere. Instead of launching huge new products, how do you keep we were talking to the Twitter guys, and they said, we're going to be doing Twitter and focusing on it for 10 years, whereas Google keeps doing new things instead of saying we're just going to focus on search.
Well, the company's always sort of seen itself as basically a company that's going to deal with interesting problems. And usually although not always, usually they're problems involving information. And so we haven't really thought things there's anything off limits when it comes to innovation and coming up with something that's really cool, that's really useful for the world. And our engineers sort of think that way. So we've always had a culture of letting many flowers bloom and let people do things in their spare time and kind of do crazy projects every now and then. Because we think that's how innovation actually happens.
Give me a couple of examples.
Well, just things like we were talking about Google News, before earlier. That was something that an engineer kind of did in his 20% time, and it was kind of because he loved cricket. And he wanted to sort of find all the cricket news, so he wrote these algorithms so he could group cricket stories from all around the world, in a place where he could easily see them, right? And that turned in. He's like, well, that's interesting. I can use algorithms to maybe organize the news in kind of interesting ways. And so they're so you could say, well, wait, you're a search company. Why are you doing news? We said, well, it's information. It's interesting.
That single thing probably transformed the business model of journalism more than anything else. You disaggregated newspapers and others as being a product on itself, started giving people the kernels of information they're searching for.
Yeah, I think that's overstated, to be honest with you, Walter. I think that's one of, Google News was one sort of, aggregator that's out there. But I think the issues with news are there are lots of different websites. They're not just newspaper websites. There are all kinds of news sites. There's bloggers. There's all kinds of user-generated content that has made it harder for the original business model of newspaper, the online business models to sort of work, right? There's a lot of competition. But yeah, I think it was an interesting kind of approach to it.
Do you feel any urge, if not a duty, to try to make sure that the business model for quality journalism continues to work?
Yes, we do. We think it's important for quality journalism to continue to work. We recognize that the initial business model, that is, giving away the content for free and running ads against it, while it's generated a lot of revenue over the years, and we've been a big part of that, both in terms of sending billions of leads, right, in the form of traffic for free, through our search engine, as well as through advertising on the newspaper sites themselves. We recognize that it hasn't been enough, right, to sustain the kind of newsrooms and the remote offices and bureaus that the business need, that quality journalism needs. So we want to be part of the solution, and to the extent that involves paid content, we want to be a distribution arm for that too. We should be. We have lots of people who are coming to us for information. So we are working with lots of newspapers right now to come up with to sort of a model that will help at least be part of, and be partners with them in a new business model. And so we hope that will succeed.
But isn't it in Google's interest that web information always remain totally free and never walled?
Not necessarily. Okay. No, I don't think so. We've never had that. There are people in Silicon Valley, I suppose, around the world, who think that information should be free.
By the way, Stuart Brand is wandering around.
Okay.
He first said that.
No, he did say that.
But the second half, which was, and information also needs to be expensive in this day and age because it's valuable. Yeah.
Exactly. So we've never believed in everything ought to be free. It's great for things to be accessible. And discovery of things is very important. Where it's not free, at least let's make it discoverable. So from the beginning of Google, there's always been lots, and we've always recognized that most of the world's information is not up on the internet for free, right? A lot of it's great information. That's what caused us initially to go after lots of sort of electronic information that was in databases that sort of people either weren't sort of paying enough attention to try to get it online, and so our search engine could crawl it and so forth. So we had a team of people devoted only to that. And then, of course, it led us to say, well, the world's great information is in books. So, let's try to get that accessible. Not, and in the case of copyrighted books, not to, not so you could consume them necessarily, but that you could find them. You at least
what's the
you would at
trade-off?
least know that they would exist, and then you can go to the library or go to the bookstore and buy it, et cetera.
How do you do that trade-off of not violating my copyright when my book is up on Google Books?
Sure. So we started this library program where we decided to work with libraries to digitize their collections, so basically you think of it the same way you think of the search engine. Just as there are people who put up copyrighted web pages up on the web, the search engine goes and crawls them, right, and then sends you back the result. Similarly, we digitized books, and then when you typed in a query that was responsive, we deliver you sort of a snippet of what that book might say if it was in copyright. If it wasn't in copyright, you can go just see the book, but a snippet of the book so you could sort of see that it exists.
But it's a sliding scale. Snippet makes it sound pretty small.
In large scale, in most cases, it is pretty small. That was a fair use in our view. And so, again, the concept of, copyright is one side of of copyright law. Fair use is the other side, right? And it's equally important, right? And you have to protect people's ability to innovate by giving them some sort of incentive, right? But on the other hand, you also have to protect the common sphere, and everything is built upon something else, right? And you couldn't review books, right? I couldn't review your books if I couldn't take a snippet of it and put it in a book review, right? And so that balance is very important, and that's what we felt we were doing. And we feel we are doing with Google Book Search.
But copyright law is like 75 years old, and its current incarnate, or Thomas Jefferson, I guess you go back to. Likewise, fair use kind of evolved on biographers trying to use J.D. Salinger's letters or something. Do we need to fundamentally revisit the notion of copyright and fair use, or is the old way of defining it pretty much there?
I don't know. I think there's a pretty good foundation now as it is. I think I'd be nervous about reopening, and of course there's a lot of that going on right now. If you look at things like ACTA, which is this treaty that has been sort of negotiated in secret with the view toward imposing a different kind of copyright law than we actually have in the United States on other countries, which is we see as pretty problematic. So I'd be pretty nervous about it. I think we have a pretty good balance, and I think as new things have come along, like the internet, we actually did change copyright a little bit to try to deal with some of these things, like the balance between having user-generated content platforms versus stopping people from just uploading willy-nilly other people's copyrighted material, right? And so we've struck the balance pretty well, and so long as the courts continue to interpret it, in reasonable ways, I think we're okay. But I would be nervous. I think there's been an assault on fair use, to be fair, and I think that that a lot of folks would like to sort of write it out of copyright law, and it absolutely needs to be defended, and we'd like to see that concept in other parts of the world where it doesn't exist right now. But I think in the U.S., I think we're okay for now.
And on YouTube, have you gotten the balance now in terms of people uploading and?
Yeah, I think the balance was always there. The DMCA, which was done 12 years ago or so, was basically said that as long as if you're a platform like YouTube is, and you upload other people's content, then so long as you find, when you're told that something infringes, you take it down, you're okay. Now, apparently there were some who thought either that wasn't the law or that didn't like the law or something. And of course, we were sued with quite a bit of fanfare over this question. And recently, I think the judge pretty much came back and said, well, yeah, the law actually says what it says. What it says it says. And so I think that's a good example. But I think that the broader issue with YouTube, though, I think is that although the law is we believe is pretty clear on this point, it's still kind of burdensome for copyright holders sometimes when you have millions and millions of video clips and it's hard to police. And so one of the things we did, recognizing that, even though we felt we were well within the law, was to come up with some technology that would actually match, let copyright owners sort of give us a sample of their video, and then we match it, and then if it matches, then we take it down right before it even goes up. So anyway, the technology can solve some of these things too.
One hobby horse I've ridden for about 5 years, and it clearly makes no sense because I've never gotten anywhere on it, so this will be my last ride on it. So I'm searching Google, and it comes up with a few wonderful pages, or it gives me a brilliant article that some scholar's written, or a piece of video I might want. I would love to be able to pay 49 cents or whatever it would be if I could just do it with a single easy click, micropayment, whatever it may be, and that would help compensate the guy who wrote the article in Time or the woman who wrote the op-ed piece, and they'd be able to put a little price on it. Why does that not exist on the web when it was originally part of the HTTP protocols that they developed?
It's not a bad idea, and I'm not. I think it probably will exist on the web at some point. I think it's you have when a whole industry sort of either goes towards not dealing with the web at all, or sort of having the free model with advertising supported. It's sort of it takes a lot of sort of market development and people working together to figure out some of these models. And I think now that the ad-supported model hasn't worked so well, I think you're going to see precisely these kinds of things, whether it's micropayments or subscriptions that are really easy to use and easy to customize and change and so forth. So I think we'll see quite a bit of that.
Well, good. I'd hope Google will be my supplier
hopefully we'll get it right.
Or
somebody's going to get this right.
I think whoever gets it right will be successful. So Biz and Ev from Twitter up here a couple days ago, and they say they haven't yet figured out how Twitter feeds should really be searched. In other words, that entire social networking, if I'm searching Gulf oil spill because I'm worried about it, should there be search of every Twitter message? Should there not be? How do you all keep up with new technologies like that come along with, like Twitter?
Well, I don't know, commenting specifically about Twitter, but the search problem is something that this is what we kind of do, right? And it turns out there are hundreds of different signals to try to figure out whether something's relevant or something is not relevant. And I suspect Twitter is working on all of those things and trying to sort them out for the particular kind of information, right, that they care about. Mm-hmm. And it takes a long time, right? I mean, there were some original insights at Google when it was originally founded, and then very quickly, people figured out, well, we can add, this signal and this other signal, and oh, this is even more important. And it takes a while. There's a fair amount of science and a little bit of art to it, but that's what we've got thousands of engineers who work on this all the time.
Mm-hmm. Are we fundamentally moving from a PC-based world to two different types of world? Mobile apps, a mobile world that's based on apps that are harder to search, and secondly, social networking. But let's start with mobile and what that does to what you do.
We're absolutely moving toward mobile. I mean, I think Eric Schmidt was at Barcelona earlier this year, and he talked about this concept of mobile first, because basically what we all think we typically do on our PCs, we're all going to be doing on things that we now sort of see more like phones.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, let me explain this more, what I meant. Time Magazine has a website, which is so easily searchable by Google.
Yeah.
It also has apps on the Droid or the iPhone, so to say Wired Magazine, that are not searchable.
Yeah, well, be careful of taking the snapshot of today and what things look like and thinking that's what it's going to look like in a few years, right? The whole, what we're all about, and many others in the industry are all about, is making the mobile platform work like the web does today, right? Okay. It's fast. You can get it anything you want. Developers can write anything that any software they want, any applications that they want. Nobody's a gatekeeper. You can go where, and there's innovation at every layer of the network, every part of the stack. And that's where we think the mobile world is going. So it's going to be as seamless to get to Time Magazine and do something even better than the web experience, right? Because it's going to know a lot, more about you. It's going to know sort of where it's going to have location information. It's going to be more social, right? Because it's easy to do that with devices, and you're out there with your friends. So I think. I think this mobile, it's going to be a lot better. Well, that's what I'm trying to say, in this mobile universe when we get there, than I think the sort of the more two-dimensional, web experiences.
And is there a fundamental change happening as people move more and more to social network platforms?
I don't know. Yet to be seen. Everybody likes to position this great, I guess whenever people talk about technology, they always like to, or technology companies, it's always pitting one thing against the other because it's always a zero-sum situation. And so you hear a lot of talk about, well, the social graph is the way that people are going to get their information in the future. Because, isn't it more authoritative to get information from people you know and trust versus just information that's just kind of out there. And then you hear people, well, real-time information is the most important thing because you want to know what's going on right now. And of course, that's going to supplant all of this other stuff. And the fact of the matter is, if you just forget about the internet, right? Most of us, as we were kind of, interacting with the world and figuring out stuff and getting and trying to learn and get at information, we get it through our friends, and our family. We go to the library. We try to find it wherever we could, and I think those different kinds of graphs, the notion that there's a canon out there, or that there's information out there that your friends don't know, right, and that you feel like you need to find out, it's always going to be there. And similarly, if we can get even a lot better at getting at the information that your friends know, which is what Facebook and others and we're trying to do, then that's really valuable too. But all these things are going to coexist, is my point, and make sort of the information world for all of us a lot richer.
But it would seem to me that searching and wanting information is actually a shared social experience, that it could be better if all my friends sort of refined the searches that I wanted.
It can be, yeah. but that's also that's the path toward closed-mindedness too, right? Right. I mean, that's how prejudice gets started, right? Because your loop of friends. I think most of us want to know more than just what our friends know. I certainly do, right? And I want to be surprised. I want to discover stuff that's new, right? That I didn't even know I was looking for, right? Because there's information that's just out there. And I'm not connected to right now.
Let me open it up, if I may. Just raise your hand, and go for it. Shout. There's a microphone right behind you.
Paul Benton. We started off discussing China as a case study. Can you talk a little bit about actually what the safety of information within the United States is? And I wonder if you can put some metrics on that. To what extent is Google actually facing civil subpoenas, requests for information from the government? Is the answer to that question trivial? Is there a significant amount of information that you're being asked to divulge on a regular basis in the United States?
Sure, great question, and it's not trivial. We get requests for information a lot from governments all over the world, including the U.S. And one of the things we did earlier this year, I don't know if you saw it, but we launched something we call the Global Transparency Tool. So you can go on our site and you can find it's sort of got a nice little map, and it's kind of cool looking, and you can click on different countries and it'll tell you how many requests we've received from those countries on various things. And we're trying to it's great. I think the first step in holding governments accountable.
How do we stand in the U.S.?
We're up there. We're up there. I think we're a U.S. site. Much of our information is located here, so we've got there are a good number of requests that we get. And so we do turn, so we want to tell an important part of holding governments accountable and holding us accountable when it comes to free expression and sort of privacy of people's information is to be transparent about it. And so that's why we launched that tool. And you can go in and see it. We're refining it, and there's some gaps in it and so forth. But over the coming months and years, it's going to get a lot better. And we want to be. My goal here is to tell the world about every request that we get in as granular a fashion as we can. Now there are Patriot Act issues, and there are things. There's sometimes there are laws that I personally oppose that say that you know, we can't tell you certain things, or certain information that we might have been asked for. But you know, barring that, we want to be completely transparent.
Let me play devil's advocate on your question, though, if I may, because you said, are there safety issues about our data, that our data is being protected? And that always presumes that protecting data and protecting privacy is good for the common good, as opposed to bad for the common good. I mean, isn't there an argument to be made that I'm in a much better place if somebody's using Google and Gmail and everything else to buy explosives and to be part of a network that might do harm, that my view of safety might be, yeah, for God's sake, share that information with the government.
Well, and the government has laws and has processes, and we have, you know, we have a Fourth Amendment, right? Right. The government can get the information. Yeah. They just have to follow the law, right? They can't just show up and say, hand it over, right? And that's so the rule of law is very important here. It's not a question of never having to give it up. It's just a question of providing it under the right set of circumstances.
But do you think we have
we try to hold the government to account on that. They came to us a few years ago with a request for like all of the search data, you know, all of these search queries, and we said no, that's just way too broad. And we went to court over it, and we ultimately won that one. So,
but do you think our society has a bit of a knee-jerk predisposition to thinking privacy is really good, but public safety is something that we shouldn't?
I'm not sure about that. I think most people's view of that is pretty balanced. You know, I think people have extreme views on either side, and sometimes the folks with the extreme views, you know, get the most, as you know, you hear from the most. But I think most people understand that there's got to be a balance here.
Yes, sir, on the aisle.
If you look at the larger strategic space that you're playing in, like the information industry, and you look at the major players such as yourself and Microsoft and Apple, how do you see this playing itself out structurally in the next 5 or 10 years? It seems that the various players are putting pawns out there on each other's space to try and get a marker, but some of that isn't turning out to be too financially rewarding. But how do you see this playing out? Question mark.
Very hard to know the answer to that question. I mean, the best way to answer that question is to look back 10 years, you know, 10 years and think of whether you would have imagined the current future, or I mean, sorry, the current situation, right? And you probably you probably couldn't, because you didn't know there was no Google, right? Or at least Google was something none of you had heard of. There was no iPhone, right? I mean, you get the picture, right? So I think what we can be certain of is that there's going to be some sort of discontinuous, you know, this some kind of break, right, that's caused by innovation, right, and something that the established players like us are gonna, if we don't develop it ourselves, are gonna have to respond to, right. But I don't think we know what that is yet. I think you can say for sure that Moore's law continues, so, right. So computing will get much better, faster, cheaper. You'll have, you know, we talked about digitizing libraries. I mean, I think you'll have the Library of Congress on a handheld phone in the not so distant future, so that's going to continue. We know that. We know connectivity is going to continue to get better, because there's going to be better access in different ways. We hope it will be cheaper. That's going to happen. We know cloud computing is going to happen. In other words, people are going to start storing more of their things in the cloud as opposed to you know, on their machines. And we know that this mobile phenomenon is only going to get bigger. And more widespread and more sort of in our lives. So how all of us in the industries, you know, sort of respond to that and deal with that remains to be seen. And you know, and probably more importantly, what new players come up enter the picture that's what's going to make it interesting.
Mm-hmm. The woman in the middle back there, yes, making it the hardest person for the microphone reachers to get to.
Thank you very much, Lori Garrett. I'm a journalist and writer, so I'm going to come back to something that Walter raised that has to do with how we continue to have a journalistic writing authorship enterprise. A lot of people seem to think that it all just comes down to an individual throws things up on the web, or they pop an op-ed on Huffington Post or Slate or whatever, and if they're lucky, they get $10 for their labors. And what we don't have any model for replacing is the actual newsroom, the full depth of the bench, all those editors, all those researchers, all the fact checkers and the photographers and the photo editors and all of that. We are losing it all. And I would say 9 out of 10 of my colleagues is no longer employed in journalism. So when people do a search on Google in 5 years, what the hell are you going to have there if none of us are employed?
She asked it more fervently than I did. Try again.
No, that's great. Well, I'd say there's 2 ways to get at that question, right? One is to say that, look, the industry needs to high quality journalism is critically important, and the only way it's going to continue in the fashion, at least that it has, is for people to start paying money. And I think there are people who want to pay money, and a fair amount of money. I'm willing to pay a good amount of money to get the information that I care about. That may mean changing some business models fairly radically for that to happen. But that seems like it's something that could happen. The fact, and the other, there is a lot of quality journalism that takes place in places other than traditional newspapers. I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. A lot of those sources, a lot of that will continue. It's very, there's technologies that are going to make, reporting from remote places by local folks easier. So I can imagine in 5 years that there will be, newspapers, other, I don't know if you call them even newspapers, but news organizations that many of which exist today, which will continue to be prominent, and that everybody will go to as the authoritative source, and that will be healthy and will have gotten through this transition. I firmly believe that. There may be fewer of them, but I firmly believe that will happen. And I also think there'll be a lot of other sources as well. So when you do that Google search, I think you'll be able to find information that kind of seems, from names that you know now, and you'll find competing information from names that you don't know today. But that's what I mean.
Eric Schmidt, your CEO, was sort of addressed that question, and I think Asney, the newspaper editors, are one of them, and said we really are going to try to be creative in looking at ways to help quality content exist. What example? What thing?
I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of things. I mean, you just look at the way online news works, right? And it's it's really lousy, right? You look at a story. When I have a paper, a newspaper, I'm holding a physical newspaper. I know what to do, right? I can scan the articles. They're all a bunch of articles on one page. I know what to do next. When I get to the end of the article, I can turn the page. It sort of makes sense.
It's a good user interface paper.
Exactly, it's a good UI, as we say in the business. And I go online and I read through some story. I get to the end of it. It's not kind of clear what I do next. In a lot of cases, it's like I have all these links and there's things blaring at me. It doesn't. I can go back to the same news. So let's say I like The Guardian. That's a newspaper I like, and I like to go back and but The Guardian, even they're pretty net savvy, but they still don't tell me. I go back and I see the same stories. Why are you showing me the same story that I've already read, right? Why don't you show me the next thing that I should be reading, right? And all of these things are possible, but we've got to apply some creativity here to get. And we're trying to experiment with some of that. We've had, if you look at our Google News service now, we've got some different UIs that we're playing around with and trying to work with folks in the industry to make it better. But there's got to be a more compelling way to sort of show people the news. And when we figure out ways to do that, I think people are going to be willing to pay a lot for that because it's really valuable.
Let's go back to the notion for a moment of free expression because it ties into that. And what challenges do you see to free expression, and what is Google doing?
Yeah, I think it's big challenges. Look, we're at the precipice of an age where there can be sort of more expression around the world from more voices, more diversity, more quality, all of that stuff than ever before, right? Because of these trends I talked about, right? Connectivity, computing power, ubiquity of mobile devices, these platforms, where people can sort of be publishers. Individuals can be publishers. We have all of that, but the future is not that rosy from a internet freedom standpoint. We're very, very concerned about more and more governments who are restricting content. It's not just China. People talk about China all the time, but this is a much broader problem. our services, Google services like YouTube, have been blocked in over 20 countries. YouTube's blocked not just in China, but in Turkey. Well, I think we were blocked in Pakistan a little while ago. And we're seeing this continue. We're seeing laws like, Australia passed a sort of a law that said that the government's going to come up with a blacklist of sites and that the ISPs have to take down what's on the blacklist, supposedly for child protection, but you can see how it can easily move into other things. I was just reading today about a new Russian law that's being debated, where the Russian government is going to be able to, the FSB is going to be able to send ISPs a list of sites that they believe are, I think the language was, that undermines the authority of state officials, or that are, that something, assails the honor of the Russian state, those kinds of things. So again, you get the picture, and we're seeing more and more of that. And so what we're trying to do is do the right thing on our side, right, in terms of, what we're doing in China, what we're doing in other places to maintain this value of free expression. We're trying to be transparent about when governments are asking us to either remove things or to hand over information. We are actively, you could call it lobbying, but using our government relations sort of resources to try to get governments to pay attention to this question, because at the end of the day, governments are going to have to deal with it.
And are you also trying to break firewalls technologically?
Yeah, and that was the fourth piece. We're starting to do more about circumvention technologies, which is another critical piece that we want to do. We feel like we need to do more on. But it's very clear that if governments are going to have to start talking to each other and get involved. It's clearly a human rights issue. If you've read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19, which clearly talks about this right of free expression. And by the way, most of the countries of the world have signed on to it, including China. And so, it is time for folks to start, holding countries to account on that. But it's also a trade question, right? Because the internet's now this global medium that touches everybody. Not just it touches your personal life, it touches, how you communicate, it touches your commercial life. And, places like the United States export a lot of, internet services around the world. So at what point do we start to say, well, wait a minute, if you're censoring the internet and you're keeping out, it's trade barrier. It's a trade barrier, just like anything else. And so we're working a lot on that, because it's very clear that countries that are censoring the internet are doing it in some cases for political censorship and for political control, but it's often to sort of promote local businesses and local media. So I think that's an important aspect of this too.
I see Charlie Firestone there, and while he's getting the mic, when Secretary Clinton did this amazingly good internet freedom speech at the museum, she asked us, and then the Aspen Institute has started off doing an internet freedom international set of standards that'll be voluntary at first, but should be a way of promoting internet freedom and holding accountable countries that don't. So maybe Charlie can ask a question.
Well, we're starting a new project called the Internet Digital Economy Accord Project, which is the IDEA project, very appropriate to today's conference. But my question is on the hacking that happened. I guess was it last December when the hacking from China, apparently China, but it wasn't just on Google's side. It was about 30 different companies, as I understand. And my question is, are you satisfied with the response that the other companies had and the U.S. government has had? And what would you do to have a more solidified response to this kind of activity, which is a very serious, as I understand it, some very serious breaches of a lot of companies?
Well, I think that's right. Look, I think it was a serious cyber attack. We shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking that was somehow this unique event in the annals of the internet and cyberspace. I mean, this is something we defend against every day, right? Of various kinds of cyber attacks, and they happen frequently. Many of them are serious. The government, I can't really speak to the responses of the other companies. I mean, we had a particular response that But the main response being that we were shoring up our networks, and we've got great security people, and we were doing more to protect our networks. Look, I think the government's response in the wake of this was quite good, and I think that they are doing a lot. They're working on this a lot more than they were in the past, because I think that they see that with this example, not only because it was targeting lots and lots of firms, but it also had some political dimensions that were, I think, interesting. So I think we're on a pretty good track with this administration in terms of sorting this out. But it's in terms of the big security issues going forward over the next several years, this is a big one, and I think the Obama administration at least understands that and is focusing on it.
Is that, yeah, okay, back there. And I'm sorry. Do one more after.
Carl Friedman. What is Google's policy in regard to and commitment in terms of matching offline data with online data?
Well, we haven't done it, and I don't know. We don't have a good way of doing it, since we don't collect a lot of offline data. I think there are a lot of people in the privacy community and the internet community who sort of see that as the third rail of privacy issues. I think it was DoubleClick long before we bought them, who sort of tried to do this and was met with I think an outcry from lots of folks. I think it'd be very, very difficult to do this well, and to do this, but not to say that it can't be done. But again, the principles of user choice, user control, of transparency would have to apply there, right? If you're able to do it, we're not doing it yet. We think there's a lot we can do to create better, targeted, services that are really cool with the information that we have. But somebody will probably figure it out.
And yes, right there on the aisle. And
You've introduced certain policies that users have reacted against. I mean, from just being having a picture on the Google front page to greater privacy concerns. At what point do you try to educate your users about the benefits that you believe those services will provide? And at what point do you try to kind of shy away from them and give them what you believe to be a less direct search or a poorer quality service, if that is what they actually want?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, I'm curious if Google requires greater privacy or access to greater privacy,
yeah.
Geolocations, history of your own search to give you a better service in search.
Right.
If users react against that, how much do you try to educate them that that's for their benefit? And
I mean, that's an important part of what it's actually a critical part of what I said earlier about, you should have the choice to be able to use some of these services anonymously. There might be services where we kind of decide, well, it's sort of what's the point of using it without, more of the providing more information, and in that case, you can opt out of the service. But I mean, one of the important things, if you're going to use people's information, one of the most important things you have to do is to try to either explain or demonstrate pretty clearly what it is the user gets in exchange for that. And that's one of the things we try to do whenever we sort of get more information than we've had in the past. But again, it's you want to have this user ability to opt out of it all, and so we'll try to preserve that.
Let me end with a long question, if I may, sort of a thing that talks about internet freedom, because you said earlier that many countries, including Russia, feel that the free flow of information could undermine the authority of the state. And the dirty little secret is they're right, that for about 500 years, more free flow of information from the movable printing press to whatever has allowed more individual freedom and allowed the spread of ideas and allowed the notion of democracy and empowerment and hurt authoritarian regimes in general. I mean, it goes in ebbs and flows, but if you look at the past 600 years, the greater flow of information makes for less authoritarian and tyrannical governments. Because governments always, in order to be tyrannical, have to control the flow of information. You were joking about Hong Kong, but when I was in China, maybe 15 years ago, I was in Kashgar, a tiny village, and went into a coffee shop where kids who speak Uyghur were on a computer. And I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "We're on the internet." And I tried CNN.com where I was, and it was blocked. I tried Time.com, it was blocked. They elbowed me aside and typed in something, and CNN comes up, and Time comes up. They say, well, we know how to go through proxy servers in Hong Kong that the censors are clueless about. To me, Google is going to be an enormous transforming force, as many other internet services are, because inevitably it favors freedom and the free flow of information and will be a threat to regimes. Do you see yourself, and do you see Google's role in a way, and its doing good role, as enabling freedom, or is that just some byproduct, internet freedom, that happens because of the technology allows it?
Well, see, look, I think it's for us, it makes a lot of sense because we believe information is always better. More information is always better. Access to more information is always better. It's better. We believe that as a core value of the company. We believe that society is better. The world is better off when people know more about what's going on in the world. It certainly makes business sense for us. There's no question about that, and you know we're not going to shy away from that point. So we're definitely committed to it, and you know, look, ultimately, Google's not the government, no matter what people say, and governments have got to sort of decide, what the international community is going to look like, right? Are we going to continue to live in a world where we treat sort of media as something that's local and that is state controlled? And so everybody says, well, it's fine. That's, you control your place. That's what sovereignty is all about. Or with the internet, does that model have to change, right? And that, to be part of, if you want, you can be North Korea if you want, and, take the drawbridge up and not let anybody in or let any information in or out. Or you can engage with the international community, and is sort of the cost of engaging with the international community to have a freer flow of information, and to lose that kind of traditional control that you've been talking about that governments are used to having. And that's something that policy folks in much higher pay grades than us at Google have to figure out, right? But it's something that we feel like we're on the right side of, and we like being on the right side of it.
Well, we totally agree that the right side of history is the free flow of information. I would think that Google as a company and you personally are in the vanguard of the free flow of information. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Watson.